Good morning, dear colleagues. We have with us today the President of Portugal, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. Presidente, bem-vindo. Obrigada por estar aqui.
Welcome, President. Thank you for being here today.
This House in 2016, you anticipated many of our common challenges and spoke of issues that continue to be relevant today. In the face of adversity, you called for unity and solidarity because you understood already then that we had more to gain by working together. That is how we dealt with the pandemic. That is how we stood up to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. President, I would like to commend you on your efforts in protecting our European values and in fighting social exclusion. The social and economic impact of the war in Ukraine, the energy prices, and an increased inflation rate across our Union are once again testing our unity and commitment towards those values. The call for more unity and solidarity is perhaps today more pressing than ever before. This is the moment to stand together. This is Europe's moment to stay united. New political and security challenges pose a greater, more complex threat to our democracies. The rise of populism and Euroscepticism, fueled by information warfare and disinformation campaigns, seek to erode trust in democratic institutions by hampering citizens from making informed decisions. How we responded to this and how we will continue to respond to those looking to undermine our democracy will be the litmus test of our values. Here I am convinced that Portugal will continue to play its part. Surveys after surveys show that the Portuguese population is exceedingly Euro-optimistic, especially about the future of the European Union. This is encouraging, and yet we must keep doing more. More to bring the message of Europe closer to our people. More to show that the values that bind us as Europeans is still so much greater than what can ever seek to divide us. And more to assure our citizens that their vote at the European elections next year does in fact matter. Estimado Presidente, the floor is yours.
Signora Presidente.
Madam President, Roberta Metsola, honourable members, I should like to begin with 3 short preliminary remarks. Just a few words because time is short and Europe has no time to lose.
Congratulate you, Madam President, and your young, determined and visionary mandate, confirming that in the current Europe there is room for everyone without inevitable differences of geography, history, demography, or the cultural, social, economic or political diversity. A segunda palavra.
Secondly, I wish to recall, on behalf of Portugal, our gratitude, openness and solidarity towards this union of peoples which gives us liberty, justice, democracy and empowerment. And all of us together, we can live together in solidarity. Portugal was, still is, and will always be on the front line, on the forefront of defending Europe and the European Union. Thirdly, to recall that it's 7 years ago that I was here on the 13th of April 2016. 1 month and 4 days after my taking up office, at a different time, in a different world, in a different Europe. People still believed in the international order, albeit in crisis. We still believed in the balance of powers albeit shifting. We believed in institutional reforms, in universal institutions, albeit delayed. We believed in European security as inherited in the mid-20th century, albeit fragile. We believed in the triumph of diplomacy over war, albeit complicated, in the advancement of human rights, albeit difficult. We believed in the primacy of globalization, multilateralism, and shared causes, human rights, the climate, our oceans, migration, refugees, terrorism, poverty, inequality, women's empowerment, the fight against child poverty, the renewal of political, economic, and social systems. The Union was still a union of 28 before the referendum of the United Kingdom, with national and European leaders, other leaders, and many believed that reforms could be postponed, as well as bringing together Europeans and widening the Union. Just for a while, nobody knew quite how long. Excellencies, the time for delay and wavering is over, and it came to an abrupt end with 2 years of pandemic and a further year of war. An illegal war, an unjust war, an immoral war, a shocking error of the Russian Federation, one that the European Union responded to in a principled way, with a firm response, with solidarity and transatlantic cooperation in a future-oriented way. In this way, a parliamentary term went by. It was almost a full political cycle that passed. A cycle spent living under emergency, under a pandemic and its waves, economic standstill and the social impacts, war, a crisis of energy and inflation, and many cumulative social impacts. And in this time of emergency, one must cope one day at a time. One is less available and able to reflect on the big questions that face our union, that face all Europeans, each of us. And we're now just 1 year from the European elections. Excellencies, what are the vital questions that we must face up to during these decisive years ahead? 1 + 7. Easy to list, but much harder to answer. First of all, the most urgent one. Ensure that when the people of Ukraine emerge from this war, and the peoples of the world and in Europe emerge, a legal, just and moral peace can emerge in respect of international law and human rights, preventing future wars and giving rise to a new future for all those living in times of uncertainty, both economic and social. And further 7 questions that will face us in the medium and long term. First question. Post-war, post-economic recovery, does the Union wish to emerge as a genuine, effective global power, yes or no? In the new balance of powers, not an international order just yet, which will take longer to emerge, established powers, weakened powers, as a result of raw and economic change, what role will the European Union play? My answer is a simple one. The strongest possible role, the biggest possible role. Unity will be the only answer. Otherwise, we will be playing the weakest possible part. Second question. Which European Union are we speaking of? With enlargement, and if so, then how? My response is yes, with enlargement, and also the best possible way, and with the best possible institutional political preparation and economic support possible. And it is only with sound preparation that enlargement will be a positive change for all concerned. Lack of preparation could lead to disappointment on a huge scale for all those who have legitimate wishes for this to come about. The third question. A European Union, but with what economic power? That is to say, what ability to recover for economic and social recovery with adversity on all sides, internally and externally? My response, and it's the only possible response, is to say we need to think of the sacrifices that millions of Europeans are making. We must speed up economic recovery. We cannot play down the indirect social effects and also the political impacts of inflation. The combined effects of pandemic and war, economic recovery of the European Union must gain pace. And in this way, we need to bring Europeans closer to Europe. Fourth question. The European Union, led by what governing guidelines, economic guidelines, in the medium and long term, especially when we give thought to enlargement to include more member states who have legitimate expectations when it comes to European funds. My response, and the only possible response, is to not postpone the clarification of these financial and economic guidelines for our future. Any delay, any postponement will make everything harder, much more difficult to solve these problems later down the line. Fifth question. A European Union, but with what policy for relations with other continents? This goes beyond migration policy. We are talking about a genuine policy for relations with other continents. Does the European Union wish to stay distant, closed in on itself due to past and recent causes like the pandemic, like the war? Or does the Union wish to be alert, proactive? The European Union must not forget that on other continents it is very difficult for people to understand that this is not a European war but a global war. And for the European Union, it must not forget the agreements and partnerships it has with key continents like Africa, Latin America, and in certain cases with Asia as well. The European Union cannot postpone the questions that will, if left abandoned, will cause migration and complex situations for the world over. The egotism must be subordinated to European values. Sixth question. Does the European Union wish to remain a pioneer on the climate and energy transition? Yes or no? But also for digital knowledge and science, and or would the European Union prefer to wait until the end of this era to begin to tackle these challenges. My answer: these questions cannot be divorced from one another. The European Union, wishing to be a global power, must also be a pioneer on climate, must also be a climate in the field of science, technology, knowledge, digital technologies and energy. And if that is not the case, we will be left behind and Europe will not become a global power. Seventh question. A European Union at the service of youth, solidarity between the generations, generational shifts within political, economic and social systems, or a union that is slow to renew itself, slow to rebuild its societies and lagging behind other continents. We must be able to react and anticipate. I have no doubt whatsoever. My response, and the only possible response, must be that the European Union should accelerate generational changes. We cannot forget young people, sacrifice them in social and economic terms in times of war and pandemic. We must support and focus on youth. We cannot sideline young people. We cannot alienate young people. We must increase youth participation, rejuvenate political systems, economic and social systems of our member states. Failure to do this will open up vacuums that will be filled by anti-system movements and populism. And if this happens, we will be to blame, not the populists, not these other movements, which simply do what they seek to do, simply because we failed to do what we must, and failed to do it in time, before it was too late. In short, there is a pressing need. We must face this war, open up a path towards peace, a legal, just and moral peace. And then we have these 7 questions for the new political cycle, which will run from 2024 to 2029. Bearing in mind that even before 2029, numerous national leaders will reach the end of their political terms, and in some cases without the possibility for re-election. In short, we face 2 ways forward. We are at a fork. On one side, due to war and slowed recovery, we manage things on a day-to-day basis. We resolve pressing needs and hold back, waiting for the next electoral period post-2024. But there is another way. To not stay, content ourselves with vague ideas or get dragged down in meaningless institutional discussions that mean nothing to European citizens. The other path is one that is based on the understanding that we can only win our future with a medium to long-term vision. If we are able to anticipate that future and ward off the frustrations and problems, it is true that Europe was built over time with progress and setbacks, quite often achieving what seemed impossible at the 11th hour. We live in times of unpredictability, in times of crisis. But uncertainty has often become a certainty in the past. Let us not use this as a pretext to shirk away from doing the things we must do. Let us take this as an incitement, an encouragement to take the actions that we need to do, to take leadership and to look to the medium and long-term future. I, Portugal, the people of Portugal, believe in Europe. I, Portugal, the people of Portugal, believe in the values and principles that found it. We believe in freedom, pluralism, democracy, solidarity, social justice, and therefore also in human rights. We, the Portuguese people, want a Europe that is stronger, a Europe that plays a leadership role, that is anticipating the future and doesn't stay on the back foot. I and the Portuguese people believe in the future. A Europe that doesn't belong to heads of state, heads of government, or party leaders. Doesn't belong to political and social leaders. A Europe that belongs to the men and women of Europe. Because this is the Europe that we want for our future. If these men and women do not inherit a strong Europe in the world, that is the challenge that we face. We have precious little time to prepare this future, and Europe deserves it. The millions of Europeans deserve it. And the world deserves a stronger Europe. And Europe, as always, will prevail.
Thank you very, very much, President. Thank you. The session will now close and we will resume with the votes. Thank you very much, President, for that amazing speech.